Growing fruits and vegetables isn't just reserved for the outdoors, and being regenerative isn't just about millions of acres of land. It's about caring for what you have control over and making choices that improve the world, like not eating plants that are shipped halfway across the world if we can avoid it. Any plant, no matter what it is or where they're put down, can grow. If it's got soil, nutrients, and water, there's nothing stopping it from finding a way to survive. Now, if a tree can grow out of the side of a mountain, why wouldn't it thrive under much better circumstances, and with more love and care from you? Even if you live inside a teeny tiny apartment. Here are some of the foods you can grow right on the windowsill, and just so you know, you can grow more food than you thought was possible. Let's have a look at some of the options. You might want to stick around to the end, we left the best for last. Let's start with the smallest option on the sill, herbs. Besides the obvious plants that can be contained in small pots, dill, parsley, spring onion, basil, mint and such, you aren't limited to just the smaller shrub and flowering varieties. A plant sort like rosemary and lavender that can turn into massive bushes actually do pretty well in pots too. They're perfectly happy to adjust their growth according to the container that they're in. We're not going to get into naming all of the herbs because the world is quite literally your oyster here. 80% of the herbs in your spice rack right now are growable in a pot. If it doesn't grow as a tree, then you can prune them to fit the shape of their container. Herbs do need to be pruned regularly if they're going to be potted though, so even if you aren't using them in your cooking for a few days, make sure to give them a little haircut every now and then to encourage growth. The only herbs, besides tree varieties, that we'd advise you to stay away from are lovage and angelica. They can be a little finicky and they really want specific conditions in which to grow. If they aren't in their natural cool and moist forest-like environments, well, they're a bit of a headache to keep alive. And don't think that a rooting herb like horseradish or ginger is off the table for you either. Anything with deep roots just needs a deeper pot. It won't do well in a small container on a windowsill, but if you are willing to put them below a lower window, in a larger and deeper container that's on the floor, they'll do just fine. Microgreens are even easier to grow than herbs, and they come with more benefits in a lot of ways. They grow fast, meaning that you can harvest from them almost daily. They take up less space, and fitting them into even the smallest bathroom window is perfectly doable. Given that you're planting a whole lot of variation in a single container, means that you'll be getting a lot more nutrients from them by just adding a handful on top of your plate every meal. But it's the fact that they don't need direct sunlight that makes them the most valuable for small spaces. Keep the plants that need sun because you want them to bear fruit by the window, and put the microgreens under a grow light on top of a shelf that's tucked away where they won't take up any space at all. You don't have to overthink potting soil, drainage, or maintenance nearly as much as with the rest. Microgreens are quick, nutritious, and delicious. Let's move on to the fruit. Almost any citrus fruit can be dwarfed if you take a few minutes to look up the technique. Really, it's not hard at all. Besides citrus, there's apples, cherries, plums, and even certain species of banana that can be pruned to fit a smaller space. You probably won't be able to fit a forest's worth of trees in pots in an apartment, but a handful of fruit trees in every corner that's close to a window will supply you with a surprising amount of food, while brightening up the space with some much-needed greenery too. Tropical fruits like avocados, guava, and mango do surprisingly well in pots too, and they'll probably do better indoors anyway. Many tropical varieties grow well for the first year or two outside of their preferred environments, but as soon as they get their first cold winter or grow beyond the wind cover of your fence, they just give up and die with that first gust of cold air. So, they're perfect for apartments and homes that are heated throughout the winter months. The natural humidity in that enclosed space also aids in replicating the rainforest environments they're used to. High heat, desert trees like dates and palms are really the only kinds that we wouldn't advise keeping indoors. It's not that it hasn't been done before, but any plant sort that's adapted to dry environments wants to grow enormously long roots to seek out water. They'll seemingly do great for a year or two, and when their roots reach the end of the pot, they choke out and die. So, keep the hot and dry trees outside, and the rest can become part of the indoor family. And don't let Google tell you not to try to pot any kind of fruit tree. People have successfully grown grapevines on apartment balconies with the intention of getting a privacy barrier from them. Passion fruit and kiwi might be better suited for very hot climates, but the point here is that any place in your living space that allows sunlight to come in, no matter how it's laid out, can probably grow something. And you won't know until you try, no matter what the variety of tree is. Sometimes you just need to get creative with how you make your space work, which brings us to vegetables. Before we get into the fun veggies, let's cover the boring ones first. Rooting veg like onions, carrots, and radishes really don't need as much space as we think they do. Carrots will grow as long as the pot they're in allows them to. You can grow a 7-inch carrot or one as long as your pinky. The health and taste of the plant won't be affected if they don't have much room. A bulging root like onion and garlic won't need as much depth, but they need width to bulb out in. Potatoes are just too big for the windowsill, but they do grow well in growing bags and in containers. They don't absolutely need to have a whole lot of sunlight either, so they can definitely be put beneath a window, on the porch, or next to a door that allows some light to come in. Radishes need no explanation. They're the smallest and fastest growing of the lot, and they can be grown in the tiniest containers of all. And remember, outside of potatoes, almost all of the rooting vegetables' upper foliage is edible too. So you aren't limited to harvesting only when the bulb is done growing. Onion tops and carrot leaves for pesto can be harvested for as long as the root is in the ground. Tomatoes. Before you jump down our throats about tomatoes technically being a fruit, we know. But the care requirements are more applicable with vegetables. And unless you're putting tomatoes in your fruit salad, we'll be adding them to the vegetable cart for the time being. The bigger varieties of tomato require care that's comparable to fruit trees. Having 1 or 2 trees won't be worth your while. They produce fruit once a season and the whole stalk is pulled out when the harvest is done. Cherry tomatoes, on the other hand, produce for longer and more consistently. They're the better indoor option because you can consistently add pickings to a salad or to the side of your plate as you go about your day. Are you going to get enough for canning and long-term storage? Probably not, but they are great for grazing on every day. Cherry tomatoes are incredibly prolific and they don't need insects to pollinate them. They grow as big as their container allows, so it really just depends on what space you can spare. The bigger the space, the bigger the bush will get, and the bigger your harvest will be. Vining varieties don't stop at beans and cucumbers. Anything that runs, like pumpkins and melons, can be made to vine up instead of running out. Ever since vertical gardening became trendy, people have been molding plants to fit their small spaces. Actually, vertical planting is probably a video we should do all on its own. It's a fascinating subject to make your crops fit into unconventional spaces. But in a nutshell, almost any plant sort will grow if it's given half the chance. In the same way a fruit tree would grow huge and free outside in the ground, but can be dwarfed to fit into a smaller space, so can your vegetables that send out runners be made to vine up or to the side if you are training their vines along the routes that you created for them. The infrastructure required is obviously more complex than just putting a pot down, but a little creativity can have entire melons and squashes encircling your windows and doorways inside too. Your space might look like a bit of a jungle, and at the end of their growing season when they start to droop and die off, isn't the most attractive thing in the world, but they will grow fruit along the support shelves you installed for them. Ideally, a small porch or back garden, no matter how small, would be much better. But it can be done. And if you don't believe us, just have a look at the insanely ingenious ways that people have grown huge watermelons inside their apartments. Personally, we think that vining fruits and veggies in the window is pushing the large plant, and the fact that people need to navigate around it a little too far. But maybe one of our viewers feels up to the challenge, who knows? And since we're on the subject of vertical gardening, you can grow anything in an upstanding grower that you can DIY for cheap with recycled materials and PVC pipes. The tiered vertical growers available on Amazon and other online platforms aren't all that expensive, but making it yourself isn't exactly rocket science either. Strawberries, leafy greens, tomatoes, herbs, onions, whatever you like, anything's possible. Vertical growers also allow you to move it to where the sun is. Most apartments only get so much sun, and to have a vertical grower that can be moved to the window that's getting that light at various times of the day is going to go a long way to keeping things growing and thriving. Vertical growers have another benefit, other than broadening your variety and movability, that is. They keep things neat and tidy. In small spaces where it's not necessarily ideal to have large pumpkins choking out your windows and making one heck of a mess when their growing season is over with, vertical growers keep the foliage in one single space, and whatever leaves or fruits drop usually falls into the tier below the one it fell from. Keeping a taller yet light structure next to a glass door or window is going to take up less space than a pot would, but it's going to grow monumentally more food than any other way. Vertical planters aren't limited to spinach and lettuce. They can even grow vining beans and cucumbers. They do well with root veggies like beets and garlic, and bush and tree varieties like chilies and tomatoes do fabulously in them. It's astounding what you can fit in there. Of all of the options on the table today, vertical planters are the cleanest, most convenient, and require the least amount of upkeep of all. Not to mention that they allow you to grow the most food for the least amount of space. At the end of the day, you don't need to spend a fortune to grow food in your apartment. And the windowsill shouldn't limit you. There's space next to the window and below it too. The glass pane next to the front door, the skylight. There's going to be a natural light source somewhere in your home. Food is food. It doesn't matter if you're growing a single pot of mint, or if you've got a living ecosystem's worth of plants in your space. Do what you can, how much you can, and most importantly plant as much as you feel you can handle. As you might have noticed, there really aren't a lot of limitations to what you can grow. It's more about how you grow it. Inside, outside, or maybe a little bit of both. Start growing now. It's never too late in the season to get at least something that can be used in tonight's dinner. Or maybe you're using a different method that we haven't heard of yet. Or you've grown something that we never thought would be possible. Let us know about your botanical apartment experiments down below. And while you're at it, why not leave a like and subscribe before checking out some of the other videos on your screen right now. See you next time. Bye.